Dick Winters wasn't your typical celebrity, but his story eclipses even the grandest Hollywood war drama. Under fire in Normandy or shivering through the siege of Bastogne, Winters' steady presence guided his men with a calm authority that was nothing short of legendary. His humility made him shy away from fame, yet the quiet heroism he displayed, from the Bricourt Manor assault to the final push into Germany, earned him a place in history books and the hearts of those he led. If you only know him through the TV miniseries, there's so much more beneath the surface. A farm-bred work ethic, unbreakable moral conviction, and a leadership style that endures as a timeless example of how compassion and courage can reshape the darkest of battlefields. Buckle up, because we're diving into the story of Dick Winters, from a small-town upbringing in Pennsylvania to the culminating drama of D-Day and beyond, with a legacy that continues to inspire soldiers and civilians alike. Let's rewind back to January 21st, 1918, in New Holland, Pennsylvania. If you're picturing a postcard scene of rural farmland, rolling fields, barns with peeling red paint and a crisp winter breeze, you're on the right track. Winters was born to Richard N. Winters, who worked as a telephone lineman, and Edith Davis, a homemaker. Ethnically, the family boasted Dutch-German roots, but culturally they were all American, forging a life during the throes of World War I. Soon after Dick's birth, they moved to Ephrata, Pennsylvania, still living under the economic weight of the Great Depression. Thriftiness, discipline, and a sense of community were more than just virtues. They were survival tactics. Growing up, Dick shared a modest home with his younger sister Anne. Their parents instilled them with a sense of honesty, hard work, and respect for others. Money was tight, but that never translated to bitterness. Instead, it gave the Winters kids a can-do spirit. Imagine a young Dick, perhaps around 10, walking the banks of local streams, fishing to bring home a bit of extra protein for dinner, or running odd jobs for neighbors to earn a few extra pennies. That's the environment that shaped him, simple but sturdy. Then there was scouting. Winters was an Eagle Scout, an achievement that's no small feat for a teenager. Building a canoe from scratch, leading younger scouts on nature excursions, and practicing first aid were standard fare for him. And we're not talking about the cushy, modern version of scouting. We're talking old-school tents in the rain, learning to track animals, maybe cooking over a smoky campfire. This period laid the groundwork for his future leadership style, methodical, calm, ready to adapt. Meanwhile, at Ephrata High School, he wrestled and played football, a quiet but determined athlete who believed in letting actions speak louder than words. In 1941, he graduated from Franklin and Marshall College with a degree in economics. Now, that might not sound like the path to a glorious war story, but it's important. Throughout his life, Winters showed a knack for analyzing situations, for calmly evaluating resources, skills that came from that academic training. While in college, he also did ROTC stints, a typical step for someone eyeing potential officer roles in the military. Then again, in 1941, the world was on the brink of massive change. Nazi Germany was rampaging across Europe. Japan was deep in conflict in Asia. The U.S. wasn't in the war yet, but many Americans sensed it was only a matter of time. Sure enough, on August 25th, 1941, just a few months before the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Dick enlisted in the U.S. Army. Initially, it might have seemed a routine step, but after December 7th, 1941, everything changed. Patriotism soared, and the Army needed more than just typical foot soldiers. It needed specialized forces. Winters volunteered for the Paratroopers, drawn by their elite reputation, and honestly, the extra jump pay was pretty enticing at the time. But being a paratrooper wasn't for the faint of heart. These were the men who'd leap from planes into darkness, behind enemy lines, to seize strategic ground and sow chaos among enemy defenses. That Winters was willing to take that risk says a lot about his mindset. Someone who believed in thorough preparation, discipline, and stepping up to do whatever the mission demanded. Jump school took place at Fort Benning, Georgia. The physical and mental demands were off the charts. Imagine you're in your early 20s strapping on a parachute for the first time, your stomach churning as you edge toward the open door of a roaring C-47 plane thousands of feet above the ground. That was the world of the airborne, a swirling mix of adrenaline and fear. Winters passed with flying colors. Then he was assigned to Camp Tocoa, placed under the notoriously harsh Captain Herbert Sobel. If you've seen Band of Brothers, you know Sobel was this demanding figure who believed in pushing men to their limits, running them up Mount Currahee, a beast of a climb, daily scolding them for minor infractions, basically forging them through fire. Some recruits chafed under his leadership. Winters, however, found a balance. He recognized that Sobel's methods, while draconian, made the company stronger. Even when some NCOs staged a revolt against Sobel in October 1942, Winters chose a path of integrity, neither backstabbing his commanding officer nor undermining the men he led. This balanced stance caught the eye of Colonel Robert Sink, who promoted Winters to first lieutenant, effectively boosting his authority in easy company. By 1944, the stage was set for the big event, Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, commonly known as D-Day. In the early hours of June 6th, Winters found himself crammed into a C-47, the dark interior rattling with engine noise, the air thick with tension. Around 1:15 a.m., the jump light went green, and he leapt out into history. However, the drop wasn't smooth. He landed off target near Sainte-Mère-Église, missing most of his gear, disoriented in the chaos. Instead of panicking, Winters methodically gathered stragglers, about 13 men total, and launched one of the most famous small unit assaults of the war, the Bracourt Manor Assault. German 105mm guns were hammering Utah Beach, threatening to massacre American troops landing ashore. Winters led his handful of paratroopers in a flanking maneuver, cleverly neutralizing each gun with minimal casualties. It's been called a textbook example of small unit tactics, and for his bravery and tactical genius, he received the Distinguished Service Cross. Picture that. A Pennsylvania farm boy not too long out of college now thrust into the role of a battlefield tactician, saving countless lives. That moment alone could fill entire pages in a history book. Carentan followed, where the 101st Airborne had to secure a critical town to connect Utah and Omaha beaches. Mortars rained down, machine gun fire crackled, and Winters, hit by a piece of shrapnel in the shin, pressed on with just a makeshift bandage. He came out of that engagement with a Purple Heart, but more importantly, with the respect of his men who saw that his leadership wasn't just about barked orders, but genuine courage under adversity. Next up, Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands, September 1944. This was the ambitious plan to push through Holland and leapfrog over the Rhine, hopefully punching an early path into Germany. Winters, now a captain, found himself in the thick of it again. He earned further renown during the Crossroads Battle on October 5, 1944. Spying about 200 SS troops gathering near a dike, he led merely 35 paratroopers in a lightning strike. Winters personally led the charge. Imagine him sprinting across exposed ground, bullets zipping overhead, directing fire with calm precision. By the day's end, dozens of enemy troops lay dead or scattered, and Winters' men suffered minimal losses. Another Bronze Star for him, another legend for easy company. Then came the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. The Germans launched a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes, and the 101st Airborne wound up encircled in Bastogne. Sub-zero temperatures, minimal supplies, constant artillery shelling. It was a nightmare. Winters, acting as the de facto battalion commander, maintained morale. The men lacked winter clothing or adequate rations, but his steady presence reminded them they weren't alone. By January 1945, the lines reached the outskirts of a small village called Foy. The assault on Foy became one of the more chaotic moments. Captain Norman Dyke, the officer in charge, hesitated at a critical juncture, so Winters replaced him mid-battle with Lieutenant Ronald Spares, who led a furious charge that finally took the village. Another Bronze Star recognized Winters' unwavering guidance amid that swirling confusion. As the war in Europe wound down, Winters found himself crossing the Rhine into Germany, promoted to major by March 1945. There, he and his men encountered Dachau subcamps, bearing witness to the Holocaust's horrors, skeletal survivors, stench of death, a trauma that sealed Winters' conviction about the war's moral stakes. Victory in Europe came in May 1945. An Easy Company famously took Hitler's Eagle's Nest in Berchtesgaden around May 5th. Winters, always pragmatic, might have pocketed a small souvenir, but his main focus was ensuring a stable post-war environment. You'd think that would be enough for any soldier's lifetime. But the Army had other plans. When the Korean War rolled around in 1950, Winters was recalled as a captain to train new paratroopers at Fort Dix and Camp Breckinridge. He turned down a combat role, feeling he'd done his part. By 1952, he left active duty for good, returning home to Hershey, Pennsylvania. He married Ethel Estoppe in 1948, had 2 children, Jill and Richard Jr., and tried to lead a normal life. He joined a friend, Lewis Nixon, from the war in various business ventures. But deep inside, how do you reconcile being a war hero with working in an office or farming? Winters found balance by purchasing a small farm in Fredericksburg in 1970, retreating to a simpler existence reminiscent of his roots. Though typically modest, he remained connected to the men of Easy Company, funding reunions, building memorials, and quietly supporting those who struggled with war's psychological aftermath. He rarely spoke about his experiences unless asked. He'd let others do the talking, all the while living his philosophy of humility and service. Then Stephen Ambrose wrote the book Band of Brothers in 1992, shining a new spotlight on Easy Company. HBO's miniseries adaptation in 2001 rocketed Winters to international fame. He wasn't comfortable with the celebrity treatment, but he appreciated that it honored the men who never returned. People around the world began to recognize him on the street, sometimes calling him Major Winters, wanting an autograph or a handshake. He'd graciously greet them, but always insisted that the real heroes were those who never got to see home again. By then, Winters was dealing with Parkinson's disease, diagnosed in the early 2000s. He spent his final years in relative quiet, exchanging letters with fans and old comrades, occasionally giving interviews, but mostly content to watch the next generation take up the mantle. He passed away on January 2, 2011, at the age of 92, intentionally keeping the funeral private, with only family and close friends in attendance. His grave lies at Bergstrasse Evangelical Lutheran Cemetery in Ephrata, not far from where he once fished and played as a child. In a sense, his story had come full circle, from a Pennsylvania farm boy to a widely admired commander, then back to Pennsylvania soil in the end. And so we reach the end of his story, but hopefully not the end of your curiosity. Next time you watch Band of Brothers, see if you can catch those quiet flickers of authenticity shining through the dramatized recreations. Recognize that behind the heroic portrayal was a real man with real fears, real frustrations, real heartbreak every time he lost one of his men. Recognize, too, that he returned to the farmland he loved, content to watch the world move on, never tooting his own horn. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.